The night shift at Meridian Tower had been vacant for 6 weeks. Every security guard who took the post quit within days, and nobody in the agency asked why anymore. Marcus Reed needed the job anyway. The pay was 40% higher than daylight hours, just enough to cover his daughter's tuition payment before the deadline. He signed the contract without reading the fine print. Somewhere 47 floors above him, the woman who owned the building had never once looked at the name of whoever guarded her lobby after midnight. The marble floor of the lobby gleamed under fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly, a sound Marcus would come to know as intimately as his own breathing. He arrived at 11:45 on his first night, 15 minutes early, wearing the standard issue uniform that hung slightly loose on his shoulders. The previous guard had been a larger man, apparently. Nobody had bothered to order a replacement that fit. A clipboard waited for him at the front desk, its pages filled with signatures that grew increasingly illegible toward the bottom. The security monitors showed 12 camera feeds, most of them trained on empty corridors and locked doors. Marcus studied them carefully, memorizing the layout of a building he had never entered before tonight. 47 floors of glass and steel, home to investment firms and law offices, and, at the very top, the private suite of Vivian Ashworth, whose name appeared on the building's deed and nowhere else. The day shift supervisor lingered just long enough to hand over the keys. His name was Patterson, a thick-necked man with a clipboard of his own and eyes that never quite met Marcus's face. "Pretty straightforward," Patterson said, already moving toward the elevator. "Walk the first floor every 2 hours. Check the stairwell doors. Log everything in the book. What about the upper floors?" Patterson paused, one hand on the elevator button. "What about them?" The rotation schedule mentioned security checks on floors 30 through 40. "Those are handled by the day team. You just worry about down here." Patterson's finger jabbed the button twice. "And don't go looking for problems that aren't there. Last 3 guys who worked this shift thought they needed to be heroes. They're not here anymore." The elevator doors closed before Marcus could respond. He stood alone in the lobby, surrounded by the kind of silence that only exists in empty buildings after midnight. The security desk was a curved granite structure that probably cost more than his annual salary. He settled into the chair behind it and pulled out his phone to check the time. 11:58. His daughter Zoe had texted him earlier that evening, a photo of her presentation board for the school science fair. She was 12 years old and already smarter than anyone Marcus had ever known. The board was covered in carefully labeled diagrams about water filtration systems, her handwriting neat and precise. "Will you be there tomorrow?" she had written beneath the image. "The judging starts at 3. Marcus typed back a response he hoped was true. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, baby girl." He had been missing things for years now. Basketball games and parent-teacher conferences and Saturday morning cartoons. Ever since Denise passed, every hour of every day had become a calculation, a careful balancing of bills against paychecks, against the relentless forward motion of a child who needed things he could barely afford to provide. He had worked loading docks and warehouse floors and overnight stock rooms, any job that paid enough to keep them in their apartment and food on the table. This security position was supposed to be easier, climate-controlled, a desk instead of a forklift, the kind of work his body could still do when he turned 50. The first few hours passed without incident. Marcus walked the perimeter of the lobby at 1 in the morning, checking each door and window, noting the locations of fire extinguishers and emergency exits. He found the maintenance closet unlocked and secured it. He discovered a freight entrance around the back of the building that wasn't marked on his map and added it to the log in careful handwriting. At 3 in the morning, he made himself a cup of coffee from the machine in the break room, a narrow space with a humming refrigerator and a laminated sign reminding employees to clean up after themselves. Someone had left a newspaper on the table, 3 days old, its headlines already forgotten. Marcus drank his coffee and watched the monitors and waited for the sun to come up. The silence began to feel heavier around 4. Not dangerous, exactly, but present. Like the building itself was holding its breath. Marcus found himself checking the cameras more frequently, scanning for movement in corridors that remained stubbornly empty. The elevator lights showed no activity above the lobby level. The stairwell doors stayed closed. He was just starting to relax when he noticed the first discrepancy. The safety monitoring system occupied 3 screens on the left side of the security desk, displaying real-time data for air quality, electrical loads, and fire suppression status across all 47 floors. Marcus had glanced at them periodically throughout his shift without really understanding what he was seeing. But now, approaching 5 in the morning with nothing else to occupy his attention, he began to study the numbers more carefully. The readings for floors 35 through 42 were wrong. Not dramatically wrong, not the kind of obvious malfunction that would trigger an alarm. Just slightly off. The kind of variance that could be dismissed as equipment error or calibration drift. The CO2 levels were reading about 12% higher than the floors immediately above and below. The electrical load showed unusual spikes at regular intervals. The fire suppression system listed a pressure reading that didn't match the pattern anywhere else in the building. Marcus pulled out the maintenance log from the desk drawer, a thick binder filled with inspection reports and service records. He flipped through until he found the section for floors 35 through 42. The pages were signed and dated, initialed by someone named T. Wellbrook, certifying that all systems had been checked and cleared on a weekly basis for the past 3 months, but the signatures looked identical. Every single one. As if someone had signed them all at once, rather than on separate occasions. Marcus photographed the pages with his phone, then turned back to the monitoring screens. He didn't know enough about building systems to understand exactly what he was looking at, but he knew something wasn't right. The numbers should have matched. The signatures should have been different. Someone had either made a serious error or deliberately falsified records that pertained to the safety of everyone who worked in this building. He picked up the desk phone and dialed the emergency maintenance line listed in the security manual. It rang 6 times before someone answered, a woman's voice thick with sleep. Maintenance services. What's the issue? Marcus explained what he had found as clearly as he could, reading off the screen values and the page numbers from the logbook. The woman on the other end was quiet for a long moment. Those floors were inspected last week, she said finally. I'm looking at the work order right now. Everything checked out. The numbers don't match what I'm seeing on the monitors. Then the monitors are probably malfunctioning. It happens in older buildings. The building is 8 years old. Another pause. Look, I appreciate the thoroughness, but we can't send a tech out for a calibration issue at 5 in the morning. Log it in your report, and the day team will follow up. I'm logging it right now. But these readings suggest a potential fire suppression failure across 8 floors of the building. That seems like something that should be addressed before people start showing up to work. The woman's voice cooled noticeably. Sir, are you a certified building engineer? Have you been trained in the interpretation of environmental monitoring systems? No, but then I suggest you stick to your area of expertise and let us stick to ours. We'll send someone by later this week to check the sensors. The line went dead before Marcus could respond. He sat back in his chair and stared at the screens. The numbers hadn't changed. If anything, the CO2 reading on floor 38 had crept up another fraction of a percent since he first noticed it. He thought about Patterson's warning, about the 3 guards who had tried to be heroes and weren't there anymore. He thought about Zoe's presentation and the tuition payment that was due in 9 days, and the stack of bills sitting on his kitchen table that he hadn't been able to look at in weeks. He pulled out his phone and took more photographs. Then he opened the laptop at the security desk and began searching for the email addresses listed in the building's emergency contact directory. The first response came at 6:15 in the morning, just as the gray light of dawn began to filter through the lobby windows. It was from someone named David Chen, a facilities manager whose title suggested he outranked the woman from the maintenance line. The email was brief and professionally dismissive. Thank you for your attention to detail. Our records indicate that all systems on the affected floors were inspected and certified within the past 10 days. Sensor drift is common in buildings of this age and does not constitute an emergency. Please refrain from contacting executive-level personnel about routine maintenance matters. Marcus read the email twice. Then he looked at the building directory again and found the address for Thomas Wellbrook, the man whose signature appeared on every inspection report. He drafted a careful message asking Wellbrook to confirm that he had personally visited floors 35 through 42 on the dates indicated in the logbook. He sent it before he could talk himself out of it. At 7 o'clock, the first office workers began trickling through the lobby, young professionals in expensive suits, clutching coffee cups and phone screens, barely glancing at the security desk as they badged through the turnstiles. Marcus watched them file toward the elevators and wondered how many of them worked on the floors where the numbers didn't match. A young man in maintenance coveralls appeared around 7:30, heading for the service elevator with a toolbox in one hand. Marcus intercepted him before he could disappear. "Hey, quick question. You work on the upper floors?" The technician barely slowed down. "Sometimes." "Why?" "I noticed some readings that looked off last night." "Floors 35 through 42. You know anything about that?" The man stopped walking. His expression shifted from casual irritation to something more guarded. "You're the new night guy. Started yesterday. Word of advice?" The technician leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You're new here. Don't try to act smart. People who make waves in this building don't last long. Just do your job, collect your check, and keep your mouth shut. People who work on those floors deserve to know if there's a problem." "There's no problem." The technician stepped back, his face closing off. "Trust me, you don't want to be the guy who says there is." He disappeared into the service elevator, leaving Marcus alone with a choice he hadn't expected to face on his second night of work. The morning dragged toward 8 o'clock, when Marcus's shift was supposed to end. He made one more circuit of the lobby, checked all the doors, and completed his log entries with the same careful handwriting he'd used throughout the night. He noted the discrepancy in the monitoring system. He noted his calls to the maintenance line and the